Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us to discuss proposed revision request 1280 titled Local Regulatory Authority Resource Adequacy Credits, which impacts the reliability requirements BPM. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined on the line by our two presenters, Delphine Ho, our Director of California Regulatory Affairs, and David Zlotlow, Senior Counsel. We also have a number of other subject matter experts from the ISO on the line. So we have Abdul Muhammad Ali, Anna McKenna, Anthony Ivankovich, Joanne Serena, Didi Sabakti, Mark Rothleader, John Gooden, Neil Miller, Stacey Crowley, and Andrew Ulmer. And they are also listed in the panelist column on the right-hand side of the screen. The presentation that we'll be discussing today is available on the Business Practice Manual Change Management webpage on the California ISO website. So to navigate there from the home page, you can go to Planning and then Business Practice Manuals, and you'll find it on that page. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping reminders I'd like to go over. This call is being recorded, and the recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. This meeting is structured to stimulate dialogue and engage different perspectives, and while we always welcome comments and feedback, just a reminder to please keep those professional and respectful. And then lastly, just please try to be brief and refrain from repeating what has already been said so that we can manage the time efficiently and address as many comments and questions as possible. There are some new instructions for raising your hand to ask a question. So if you connected to audio through your computer or used the Call Me option, you'll select the Raise Hand icon, which is located just above the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. But if you dialed into the conference and did not join by computer, you'll need to press #2 to enter the question queue. If you need any technical assistance during the meeting today, please send a chat to the event producer. We will be taking questions throughout the call. Just a reminder to please remember to state your name and affiliation before making your comment. If you don't enter the verbal queue, you can also send your question in a chat message to me, or you can send it to all panelists. The agenda for today, we are going to start off with a rationale for the PRR 1280 withdrawal, so I'll hand it over to Delphine here in a second. Then after we get through that topic, we will go into the intended next steps on processing local regulatory authority resource adequacy credits. And so David Zlotlow will go through that. And then we'll wrap up today's call with some next steps. So with that, I will turn it over to Delphine.
Great, thank you, Isabella. So I'm going to go over the rationale for staff's withdrawal of proposed revision request 1280. So let me go back a little bit to the background. So over the last several months, since the Executive Appeals Committee convened on December 9th, 2020, and PRR 1280 was held in abeyance, CAISO staff has been working really closely with a variety of local regulatory authorities to better understand why and how crediting is used, and to discuss with them options to transition away from this practice. Through that outreach that we conducted, we had discussions with 11 local regulatory authorities that use any form of non-net zero credits. And through this outreach, the CAISO and the LRAs have worked very collaboratively through many of the practical barriers to showing formerly credited resources on supply plans. And the CAISO staff believes that LRAs broadly fell into 3 categories regarding PRR 1280 resolution. In the first category are those local regulatory authorities with really no issues, and maybe it was just an educational aspect in implementing the net zero credits rule that PRR 1280 articulated. In the second category are other local regulatory authorities that had some barriers to that, but are at this point on a pathway for resolution. And then the third category are sort of just actually a single LRA that likely needs to contract for additional resource adequacy capacity. And again, of the 11 LRAs that we originally started extensive outreach to, CAISO staff views that there really are only 6 in the first category, 4 in the second, and only 1 left in the third category. So of the 4 local regulatory authorities in the second category, which again is the pathway towards some resolution, CAISO staff believes that there's through those discussions, we've been given a much higher level of comfort based on the willingness of the parties to engage with us in a very productive discussion and really identify specifically the follow-through actions that ensures the integrity of the resource adequacy fleet. We really want to extend a note of thanks to those LRAs for their time and their effort, for engaging with us, going through many discussions and calls and meetings, and having a lot of the variety of their staff on the calls. And we really appreciate that spirit of collaboration and working closely with them. And we understand that we continue to work with the LRAs to reach a resolution. And so those discussions are still ongoing. Some of these processes will take a long time, and we completely understand that, but we're really given that level of comfort by the engagement through those discussions and very productive discussions and a lot of brainstormings and explanation. So consequently, we believe that given that staff is comfortable withdrawing the PRR in order to continue working with those LRAs so that we can go through each of their sort of unique situations. But with that, the CAISO staff still wants to reiterate the importance of the RA fleet for reliable operation. Having more RA capacity rather than just credits is even more critical, and that was recently articulated in a joint statement and letter from CPUC President Batcher and California Energy Commission Chair Hochschild, requesting that the CAISO use its capacity procurement backstop authority to procure additional capacity to address this scenario that we're seeing playing out kind of week over week this summer, which is to address the net demand peak and really unprecedented climate change-driven heat events, especially this week as Portland nears 109 degrees. So with that, that's kind of the rationale for withdrawing the PRR. We're continuing to work very closely with those LRAs that have kind of good discussions with and a pathway forward. But as David will describe in the next part of today's discussion, the CAISO staff recognize that the progress we made thus far in this discussion, but we want to balance that with ensuring reliability and the integrity of the RA fleet. So with that, I can turn it over to David, unless we have any questions.
Yeah. Hi, this is David, everyone. I guess I'll just go through my material, and then I think we'll open it to questions, because I think everything here, the topics can bleed into each other. So I'll just get through basically this slide, and then I think we can open it to questions. So this is David Zlotlow here. So what Delphine was just talking about was kind of describing how we got to today, how we got to here. And then on this slide, slide 5, I'll just kind of cover what this means, what happens going forward just in terms of administering RA processes on the ISO side. So a couple big topics. The first bullet, the ISO, as soon as practical, with an asterisk there, because we still need to sort of identify what system changes are needed to get this in, but we're going to try to get that done as soon as possible. We'll resume loading LRA credits upon receipt. So there, during the abeyance period, we were sort of staggering when the credits got loaded. That was, there were reasons for that, dealing with tariff. But in any case, what we'll do is we'll resume the credits being loaded upon receipt. We're not going to have to do that staggering approach. So that's one big change you'll see in the process. And then the other items are largely similar to what we've been doing during the abeyance period, where we've said PRR 1280 is not in effect. So, in large part, these will, continue on pending, the conclusion of the outreach Delphine was referencing, and any, potential future PRRs, future tariff changes, whatever. But for the time being, things are going to effectively be largely the way they were in terms of the RA processes. So first point, deficiency notices to LRAs and LSEs. We will generate them based on RA capacities. In quotes there, that's to follow the tariff terminology, which, again, to back up for a second, a lot of this is governed by tariff compliance, as just a formal matter, aside from sort of the bigger picture RA topics that we're also talking about. But we will generate the deficiency notices based on what meets the definition of RA capacity, which will include, if you have LRA credits that relate solely to portioning out the capacity from a resource that is shown on some LSE supply plan, that would meet the definition, and we can count that in terms of generating the deficiency notices. But other LRA credits that don't relate to something on a supply plan would not be included. So on the third bullet, talking about CPM designations, the important point there is CPM designations are discretionary. So if there's in the year ahead or month ahead process, if there is a RA showing deficiency, and after the cure period, if that deficiency remains, it is still discretionary to issue the CPM. And so part of the ISO's consideration in exercising that discretion will be to look at the credit. So, even if the credits don't meet the formal definition of RA capacity, that can still be, relevant information we can consider in seeing whether a deficiency-based CPM is appropriate. So in saying that, that's not to guarantee that, for example, if there's a 100 megawatt RA deficiency and we see, 200 megawatts of RA credits, that's not going to guarantee we're going to forbear from issuing a CPM. So it's not a guarantee, but, it's something we will look at. We may evaluate what's supporting those credits. If there's, credits far in excess of the RA deficiency, we feel, that we're relatively comfortable saying those credits at least provide the benefit that the missing shown RA capacity would provide. That's probably a good reason not to go ahead and issue the CPM. So again, it's information we will consider in our discretion. There's no guarantee necessarily that credits in excess of the deficiency will avoid CPM, but it's a possibility, and that's really all we can say at this point. So the fourth major bullet point here, talking about allocating CPM costs. So, most of the CPM categories are designated pro rata based on the RA deficiency. So again, that raises the question, how are we calculating that deficiency? And for consistency, we really need to keep the same notion of deficiency that we had in terms of generating the deficiency notices. Again, it will be based on what meets the definition of RA capacity. So to capture the interplay between the third and fourth bullet points, the trigger for issuing deficiency-based CPMs will at least look at all credits. However, once we pull the trigger on a deficiency-based CPM, then the strict allocation of the cost of that CPM will then go back to looking just at what would meet the definition of what is RA capacity. And then finally, just to be clear, what we've been talking about throughout this PRR 1280 process is about credits provided by a local regulatory authority. So RMR and CPM credits, that is credits granted to LSCs based on RMR and CPM designations that have already happened. None of this was ever meant to affect that. Those are separate processes. There's tariff provisions covering that. So that is, really a separate topic from anything that was ever meant to be covered in PRR 1280. So, that can be a little confusing sometimes because we're talking about credits, and, some credits are not really meant to be encompassed within this whole PRR 1280 conversation. So that's sort of the LRA, crediting processing issues that will be, how we'll be handling them going forward. And then briefly, we can go to the next page, page 6, and then we can open it up to questions after that. Okay, so sort of the next immediate step is at some point relatively soon, we hope, next coming weeks, we'll be posting a written statement sort of really summarizing and capturing everything we've talked about to this point on this call so far. So you have the PowerPoint, and then we provided more detail verbally here, and then we'll intend to put out something more comprehensive in writing so everyone can, see everything clearly documented before them. And then we will put a market notice out. Once that's ready, there will be a market notice, so you all will, be aware when that document is released, so it won't hopefully sneak up on anyone. And then any outstanding questions, once that's published or after this call today, after we take questions verbally, direct those questions to bpm_cm@CAISO.com. So I think, Isabella, with that, I don't think we had any more material on the slides. I think with that, I think we can be ready to just open it up to stakeholder questions.
All right, thanks, David. So To raise your hand, you can do so by pressing the raise hand icon located at the top right of the chat window. And then if you dialed in only and are not on the WebEx, you'll need to press #2 on your telephone keypad.
All right, and I do see we have a question already in the queue. All right, and caller, you are being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Noah Tom from Middle River Park. Just asking for clarification. Will you be making changes to the BPM for the CPM side to state that the credits may or may not be used in determining the need for CPM?
I think Noah, I think it's already a discretionary thing. So I'm not sure if we would, maybe for clarity we could look at that, but I don't think it's a necessary BPM change on that point. But I guess we can sort of see if there's a way to add that just for purposes of clarification.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful potentially to think about for transparency purposes that for folks to know what the ISO is considering when it determines there's a deficiency, especially if it's, including or excluding certain types of capacity. Thanks.
All right, and I do see we have an additional caller in the queue. Caller, your line's being unmuted. Please go ahead. And Brian, just a reminder to take your personal device off mute.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it's Brian Thaker with Middle River. Middle River seems to be dominating the question so far. David, my question goes back to your slide, which is regard to the potential implications of a deficiency. It's my understanding. Well, I'll just ask the question straight out. When was the last time the ISO CPM'd for a deficiency? It's my understanding that all of the recent CPMs are significant event CPMs, not deficiency CPMs. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how likely it is the ISO would issue a CPM for a deficiency.
That is correct. That the CPMs of the last 2-3 months have been either exceptional dispatch or significant event, and over the last multiple years. Yeah, I mean, almost all of the CPMs have been, almost all of them, I think, have been exceptional dispatch. There have been a few for deficiencies. It might have been, it's been a few years now, I believe, and, all the records are there out on KISO.com. I don't remember the exact details. It's been a few years, but it has happened, but it's been relatively rare. But that's not to say, I mean, things are evolving very quickly, overall in the RA space. So the fact that it's been, a minority of the instances of CPM designations, that's not necessarily to say that will continue, or it might. It's, things are certainly evolving rapidly in this whole area. So, but purely based on what's happened before, it's been a small share of the CPM designation.
Yeah, thanks, David. It's my recollection, which may be cloudy as well, that I think the ISO has only ever issued 2 year-ahead deficiencies for Moss Landing and for Encina 27 or 2018. I'm not aware, or I don't remember if the ISO has ever issued a CPM for a month-ahead deficiency. So unless any of the ISO folks on the call can recall that or point me to that.
Those were the 2 I had in mind. I just didn't want to limit myself to say those were the only ones. But, if there are a handful of others, it would be, a handful. But the basic trend in terms of the number of designations, holds.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, David. Apparently we share the same cloudy memory. I appreciate the answers. Thanks.
All right, and we do have several callers in the phone queue. Caller, your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Efren Sandoval with the City of Vernon. I just wanted clarification. Did I understand correctly that in order for you not to receive a deficiency notice, the credit still has to show up on your supply plan?
Yes. So, right. And again, the deficiency notices, I mean, that sort of sounds kind of like, well, like a bigger thing than it is. I think it's effectively just a notification in CIRA that the margin, the LSC plan has not demonstrated sufficient capacity to meet the reserve margin or something like that. So that's the quote deficiency notice. But yes, that is programmed to generate based on things that are on a supply plan. And then, not overall audit process, there's the cure period. There's no, further notification that goes out if that deficiency remains uncured at the expiration of the cure period.
Okay, so please help me understand. So what has changed from, in other words, this PRR 1280 being withdrawn? Wasn't that the whole purpose of getting LRA to show supply plan, show their credits on supply plans? If that's being withdrawn, but yet we're still getting notifications that we're deficient, isn't that kind of like conflicting with I'm confused as to, by you withdrawing it, to me seemed like, okay, we're going back to the way it was before.
Right. And so what I said at the beginning of my comment, was that this largely lays out the approach we've been taking during the abeyance period, which, we highlighted, I think, in a call in January when we were first trying to, implement the committee's decision. And so this largely follows what we have been doing through the course of 2021. There's the PRR, but we also had to consider some of the tariff compliance angles, and then that this approach was the best way we could identify to kind of cover all the angles. So this is really should be matching in large part what we have been doing throughout 2021.
Okay, thank you. And then just one last comment, I guess, just for the record, I guess, for us, receiving deficiency notices do matter because we want to be able to show that we are meeting our requirements. And even though, and from our point of view, we are meeting our requirements because our LRA allows for our interruptible to be issued as or used as a credit. So just for the record, we do care about these deficiency notices, and we would prefer not to be receiving them because from our point of view, we are not deficient. So just wanted to put that out on the record. Thank you.
All right, and we do not have any additional callers in the queue at this time.
I'll give it a minute and see if anybody else enters the queue.
All right, I believe the queue is still empty.
Okay. Well, Delphine or David, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we conclude?
I don't have anything else, but yeah, but thanks everyone to getting on this call and working with the CAISO on this. Thank you, Isabella.
All right. Thank you everyone for your participation today, and have a great rest of your day.